Welcome to the Key of Life podcast, a show where we explore the limitless creative potential that exists within our human life. From birth to death, ancestry, and everything in between, every human holds a key that opens a door of possibility to create, sustain, and transform within ourselves and with others. When we share our keys, we create deeper access to the keys within ourselves and open the doors of remembrance within others. I'm your gatekeeper and guide, NinNeru'aEl Key Hog. Let's open the door together. Hello and welcome to the Key of Life podcast. Today we have Taylor, who is an astrologer, traditional, radical, birth keeper, wild woman. I don't even know what else to say, like witchy. No? Occult maybe.
Yep. That about hits it, I feel. Even when you asked me, I was like, wow, there's so much to say and so many, like, how do I condense this? I feel like that covers it. I mean, that's what I do, like astrology and birth keeping and serving women in community and ceremony, and on an individual level, yeah, I'm pretty esoteric and mystic and kind of always searching for more truth and more answers and more mystery. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the topics for today are a mix of growing up occult, because me and Taylor have the synchronicity that we both grew up with a family lineage who was like highly spiritual, highly into like occult practices, all the stuff that, you know, before it turned into new age, it was like actually in its integrity. So that, and Taylor is pregnant right now. This is her second baby, and she's having a wild pregnancy after her first experience of an in the system pregnancy and birth. So we're gonna mix the two worlds. Basically, it's gonna be like a chill, casual chit chat. I'm kind of excited about this. I haven't had an episode like this before.
These are the best. This is where all the flow comes, because it just goes where it's supposed to go, and whatever comes from it is what will be. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about, like, before you discovered like wild pregnancy, free birth, and now after, how you're living now and how that ties into sort of your upbringing and all the synchronicities and all that stuff too.
Yeah, so this pregnancy has been an interesting journey, which is actually really what ties into my upbringing and my matrilineal line, which I'll get into in a minute. But yeah, my first, or I guess before I found out about free birth and wild pregnancy and just this kind of like reclaiming that's going on with women and this movement that's emerging, I lived my life in a really holistic way already, which was interesting. I'm essentially completely removed from the medical system, in that, you know, I'm not somebody straddling the fence where I have, you know, a family doctor or like anything like that. I'm not seeking Western medicine, other than for emergency purposes, which is really the only purpose I find that it serves.
Same.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm happy that it's there for emergencies, but other than that, it's not something that is a part of my life. It's not a part of the way that I mother or parent. It's just not in our household at all, whether it's pharmaceutical or just, seeing, you know, your regular Western practitioners and things like that. So it was interesting to me, when I came upon this information, because it was kind of like the last piece, I want to say, that wasn't, or like hadn't fully integrated. And that's also because of my first pregnancy and my experience with a hospital birth and just a pregnancy in the system. And it's interesting because when I was pregnant, which for anyone listening was 10 years ago, so I was 21 when I had my first child. I had done so much research and I felt like I like scoured the internet for everything, and any information. And I never came across anything about like free birth or, um, yeah, just like a more natural pregnancy. The only thing that was like out there was like kind of, to have a water birth. And it was all very kind of induced with fear around it.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't resonate with me at the time for where I was in my life, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, it was, I mean, highly traumatic and henceforth didn't want to have any more children going forward. So fast forward to now, obviously you and I both come from the same lineage of mentorship in birth keeping.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when I came upon the information, I actually found all of it originally through Yolanda. And that was kind of my first entry into this world. And everything just started clicking. And it was from a personal perspective of my prior birth trauma and my experience in the medical system. And everything just clicked really quickly. I know some women come upon this information and it's kind of something they have to like move into or like mull over, or they're not quite sure, it feels kind of dangerous. For me, it was like an instantaneous,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as I found this information, it was like that, when you hear something so true to your soul, it just like hits you in such a resonance that it's like it's just
Yep.
so quick. And that's what happened. And it was like I was instantly hooked into that entire world and just the truth of it all. And I felt like I needed to scream it from the rooftops just because I had lived so many years not even realizing what had happened to me and then having the language to describe it. So then, of course, last year, at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of my Saturn return, which we'll get into why that's all connected. I literally signed up for the Radical Birthkeeper School, like just on a random day. I was like, yep, this is what I need to do. And since then, obviously I became pregnant, which is also synchronistic in the whole experience. And now there's just like no other way to me. It just doesn't make any sense to do it any other way. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but kind of puts us where I'm at now. And it
Mm-hmm.
also just aligns with my life in every other way. Like my child's not in a regular public education system. My partner and I live very traditionally in like traditional gender roles, and I'm not in the medical system. I'm just like really not in these matrix systems. So it was like kind of the last piece. And now it just feels everything's like really aligned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you said like not in the matrix world of it all, because I think a lot of women too, who I've met at least, when they're like they may be of the same mind with like the spirituality and everything like that, and then when it comes to birth, it's like this belief that they can become this like Neo in the Matrix person in the hospital, when it's like you're definitely putting yourself all the way in the matrix, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that that is like giving birth at an environment where literally everyone and everything is a fucking Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're in animal brain flight or flight mode birthing, are you really willing to take that all on in that state,
In
is
that state.
my question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's like something that's even come up for me in this wild pregnancy. And I'm sure you'll resonate with this through like women that you've served and worked with is I feel like every woman in a wild pregnancy has some sort of kind of irrational fear or like something that just kind of keeps coming up for them. And it's interesting because for me, it's nothing to do with birth. Like it's nothing to do with the actual birth or being in the birth portal. I have zero fear about that, just because of where that truth sits within me.
Mm-hmm.
But I have had a very interesting experience with constantly wondering if I have preeclampsia, which I have no like. Listen, I have nothing that is actually showing me that in any sort of way,
Mm-hmm.
or like how I feel in my body. But I actually started to kind of pick or like go through the layers of why I keep coming back to that. And why I keep coming back to that is because I think unconsciously it's the only thing that makes me feel like I may seek medical attention. And to give birth in the hospital is my biggest fear when it comes to this birth, or like
Mm-hmm.
to be, like you said, in that environment in such a sacred space and then have to be like fighting off and warding off all of this kind of like demonic cultish
Yep.
energy, and to be in that situation where I'm literally having to choose. So that is like my biggest fear, and I've identified that, and now it makes sense why my brain keeps kind of trying to ward off this like one thing that could possibly um push me to seek medical attention, even though that isn't even the case in the first place. But it's like I had to go through that the last couple of weeks, which was really interesting. And I think this is the difference too with wild pregnancy, is obviously you're in radical responsibility to yourself. So it's like you're constantly checking in with yourself and what feels true for you, and what feels, that risk versus safety factor, and what feels riskier. And for me, 99.9% of the time, walking into a hospital is always going to feel like a bigger risk. So yeah, so it's just been an interesting little journey the past couple of
Nice.
weeks.
Nice. Firstly, I want to say thank you for being so, excuse me, so like blatantly honest and plain with saying that it is demonic. Because I try to explain this to people, and it's like it doesn't land when it's like, no, like this is straight up demonic. The
Mm-hmm.
hospital system is designed in a way to, in my opinion, satanically ritually abuse women and their
Mm-hmm.
children. In so they are trauma bonded to the system and detached from their bodies, to where A, they don't believe the signs their bodies are sharing with them to let them know what's happening. And then B, so they then outsource their care, their health, their autonomy over how they even want to like approach their own bodies to an external source, you know?
And how they mother to an external source, because I see so many women go against their own intuition when it comes to their children, and then seek out that external like medical care. And this
Mm-hmm.
is where this kind of crosses over, because I had a extremely traumatic birth with my son. And I believe on I'll give you two ends of the spectrum here of how this affected me. So one, I do believe that it is through my connection to a higher power, and through my upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
and through my matrilineal line, and the way that I was raised in such a spiritually conscious way, um, that I was able to overcome in a lot of ways the damage that their like satanic ritualistic abuse does to women, because I left that hospital way before. I think they want you to stay overnight, or like whatever it is, 20, like I left 8 hours after my son was born, because I was like, I literally can't be here anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I went on to be extremely attached to my son. I breastfed him for 4.5 years. I just went full on with attachment parenting and co-sleeping and everything like that. And that isn't the norm from women who come out of births like I had in the system. I didn't have a treacherous breastfeeding relationship. I didn't feel disconnected from my child, and I feel very blessed for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do attribute that to my relationship to spirit, and just how I was raised, and being able to anchor in that unconditional love and that source love in my body. But on the other hand, shortly after this is gonna spark some outrage here.
No.
um, shortly after I had my son, I was not vegan when I was pregnant and I had him, but shortly after I became vegan, and I stayed that way for 8 years and completely ignored my body. I was completely ungrounded. I would say I was like very mentally unwell in a lot of ways, though I carried it very quietly. And yeah, I just ignored all my body cues. I had no connection to my body. I wasn't grounded in my body. And, you know, I know there's a lot of different conversations about how people feel about plant-based diets or vegan diets, but I would argue that it's another way. Why it's being promoted so heavily is because when you're not grounded in your body, you can have other entities and things come and take over you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why it's so promoted. So when I think about that very easy, like it like scooped me up so quickly after my birth, and then I was like that for so long, even though it was such a detriment to myself, that also correlates for me in like a really big way. So
100%. And I believe the
mhm.
same thing about how it's being promoted right now anyway. Because what I believe is that veganism is healthy short term if you're trying to like really do a detox on your body, which it makes sense why maybe you were feeling called to do that right after, you know, being inundated with a bunch of drugs and like synthetic things. But then the catch is when it's like this whole rhetoric happens where then it's like, oh, I have to remain vegan because it is the superior whatever, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's when it starts to take a toll on you mentally, physically, emotionally, et cetera, et cetera. Because I was vegan for like a year and a half or so, right after, like, not right after, but it was like the time when I went vegan is right after a full year of me eating like complete garbage. So I understand why I felt called to do that. And I wasn't like attached to it in any way. I was just like, okay, like I feel like it's time for me to eat some fish. And then I stopped eating meat. But it's 100% true. While I was vegan, especially towards the end, I was very ungrounded. I lost a bunch of freaking weight. I was attributing the like ungroundedness to like, oh yeah, like I feel so energized, when it's like, no, like I am not in my body right now.
Oh yeah,
And
no, it's a complete difference. And that's what I mean when I say that I was like very mentally unwell or mentally ill. I wasn't, when the vision that comes to mind, I think for a lot of people when you say that, is like I wasn't like externally struggling or like having these, but I just mean the internal, um, like the internal self-talk, the way that I was approaching things, my reactions to things, the way I was trying to work things out, my relationship, just everything was like very, I loved how you said like, oh, I'm so energized, but it's like this hyper energy that is like not not suitable. And yeah, I would say the first year I was vegan, I felt like obviously, again, like you said, like I was inundated with a bunch of drugs and everything, and yeah, it felt great. I was paying more attention to what I was putting into my body, and so on and so forth. So obviously there's that switch where like, yeah, you feel really good. I would say shortly after that though, I was starving, but what's sick about it is I got so used to like starving that it just became normal. And that's where I'm saying like there was just literally no connection to my body anymore. And it was so interesting because I started doing all of this spiritual facilitation and holding women's ceremonies and circles, and just building this huge connection and network of sisterhood here where I live. And at the same time, when I look back, like I was just completely fucked, like to put it like lightly. And then it was only how this all plays into this pregnancy is it was literally the fall equinox of 2021. And I don't know what it had been growing in me throughout the summer and so on and so forth. And I was kind of like moving towards, I was like, oh, like every time, you know, my husband makes salmon, like my mouth is watering, like I really want it, but I'm not letting myself have it, and just all this nonsense. So fall equinox, I'm pretty sure I went out and bought like a whole chicken, and I was like, I'm just gonna make this harvest meal for my family, and I'm gonna eat the fucking chicken. Like I was like, I'm just gonna eat it. I don't care. And from then on, I think like within a week's time after that, I was like at the farm buying raw milk and like going like making my first batch of bone broth, and I was just like in because I had never felt, I think I cried actually after that meal because I had been so unsatiated and undernourished that it was like almost a spiritual experience to just feed my body properly for the first time in literally 8 years. And then I conceived this baby exactly a year to the day later on fall equinox 2022. So,
oh my God, I literally just got chills.
yeah.
Wow.
So it a full year though, like a full year of just like I just went full in and like nourished my body, and yeah, it's just completely different now. So, but all to do with, I still attribute it all to the immense amount of trauma and the like ritualistic abuse that happens in obstetrics. And I agree with you. I try to tell women, or like just when I have conversations about it all the time, because they're like, oh yeah, like it's all about the money. I'm like, this is more than the
It's
money.
deeper
Like
than that.
this is
Like,
a whole other level. You are attacking women in their most sacred spiritual form. Like you are more connected to God in those moments than any other moment, and they're abusing you. Like, what do you think they're trying to do? What energy do you think they're siphoning? Like, what do you think is happening in that room? So yeah, but I attribute all of that, like just all of that damage and all of that incongruence in my body to that experience. And again, what's fucked about it is I didn't even know what had happened to me. I knew something was wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when I left that hospital and like, you know, those first few weeks of postpartum, again, which I had no language for back then. I was such a little babe at 21 years old. But yeah, I knew something was off. I knew that I wasn't myself. I knew that I was suffering, but I also, again, attributing to my upbringing, I'm like highly emotionally aware. I'm a very self-aware person. I'm very observant. So I'm like, oh, like I'm not feeling okay, but I'll be okay. Like I'll work it through, like I'll work it through myself. And again, it wasn't until I found Yolanda's work and started listening to some of the things she was saying, and I was like, holy fuck. Like this is what happened to me. And yeah, it all kind of just came spiraling through that, I guess you could say. So.
Yeah. And thank goodness that it did.
Oh God, I know.
Thank goodness that it did. And I also want to presence that this is a lot of women's experience who go through hospital birth, and they have an internal feeling that something is wrong, but it's like they can't piece together what exactly it is, because but like my baby's fine, and like, you know, I'm fine, like I came out fine, quote unquote, per se, like as in like I didn't die, my baby didn't die. It doesn't, like, that isn't sometimes that isn't like the absolute worst thing. I'm not saying that the absolute worst thing is like, you get what I'm saying. Is sometimes,
I get what you're saying. No, I do. I really do get what you're saying.
Sometimes it's not okay, even if your baby didn't die and you didn't die. You know, like,
well, it's just, well, and what's sick. what's sick for me about it too is that the perception of birth, because they've inundated it so much, is that these are the regular stories. Like, you're not hearing ecstatic birth stories from all the women that you speak to and the women in your family. Like, for example, in my matrilineal line, almost all the women, except going back to my great grandmother, have had like C-sections. Isn't that funny? So I came out of the hospital because I didn't have a C-section. I was about, 20 minutes away from having one, but I didn't have one. So I came out feeling like, well, of course I should be so pleased because I didn't have surgery. Oh, I actually got, I actually had a vaginal birth. So praise be, like, that's what I should be thankful for. But no, it wasn't like that at all. Like, it was probably one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. And yeah, I knew something was wrong. I knew something didn't feel right. But then you're also looking around and it's like, who has any different story to tell you?
100%.
It's just normalized. Of course you feel like shit in your postpartum. Of course, like, you're completely emotional and distraught and you have no idea who you are. And we're not talking about the rebirth process of made into motherhood. We're talking about, like, in the void of complete darkness, have no idea which way is up. Yeah. And just like complete loss of self, which is so different. So
100%.
yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy. And it's crazy that that's just it's crazy that so many women know something isn't right. And then the cultural overtone of like, no, everything's fine.
Like,
you don't know what you're talking about. Everything's fine. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, this is not okay. So again, it's just like that cult like tactic, right? Of that initiation of like, here, let's just put all of you through it so then nobody can tell that something's actually wrong.
Oh my gosh, I love that you even described it that way. Why I love the way that you describe that is because that's exactly what it is. What people don't understand is that part of this whole ritual abuse type stuff is to get you out of your body. So what are they doing in the hospital? Inundating you with a bunch of narcotics like freaking morphine, fentanyl, like all of these things that are getting not only you out of your body, but your baby out of your body. And then they're abusing you by constantly shoving their fingers up your vagina, cutting you without your consent some of the time, talking to you and being up in your space and invalidating you and basically like gaslighting you into believing that what you know is true is not true. Like, this is like a mass ritual abuse initiation and like reprogramming of your brain. Literally, it is MK Ultra. Like, they are literally MK Ultra-ing you while you're fucking giving birth. And this is what I don't think people understand, which I see so clearly, and it fucking pisses me off. It's like, no, like, as you were saying before, it's way deeper than the money. These people are demonic and they're fucking MK Ultraing women while they have their babies. And I'm sick of it. But yeah.
No, 100% completely. And I'm so happy you said MK Ultra, because that's literally what is happening the entire fucking time. And what's so sad is you can see, if you like go out in society and start talking to women, and I'm not talking about women who are even, where you and I are and like know this. I'm talking about just go out into a group of women, go sit in a kitchen with a group of women and talk to them about birth, and all of them, like, it's like, and what is the effect of that? What is the effect on the collective consciousness? What is the effect on the children that are coming into the world? And how many generations has this been going on now, where I don't even think we fucking know like how deep the effect is of what is occurring. And God bless our mentor, because when she says that this is the greatest psyop that has ever happened to humanity, like, it is 100% hands down number one, because it affects everything. You're dealing with source and creation and birth and like new life coming onto the planet, and you are ritualizing and abusing, and like you said, MK ultraing these women and these babies essentially to what is happening. And that's why you're filled with drugs. I was so drugged during my birth that my eyes were rolling back in my head and I like was gone.
Wow.
And then again with the cutting, like, okay, I know a lot of women, they'll be forced into a C-section because they're told there's an emergency when there's no emergency, or, you know, they're just going past the time, failure to progress, whatever. We know all the things, but I don't think a lot of women talk about, like, I had an episiotomy. Nobody told me they were giving me an episiotomy. Nobody told anybody. Actually, I didn't even know I had an episiotomy until my husband told me an hour later.
Wow.
So the doctor, like my husband will literally say, he's like, I was there, I was watching our son come out, and all of a sudden there were scissors and they just cut you. Nobody said anything. There was like no conversation about it. So this is, again, it's like, this is bodily trauma at the same time too. And we all know that the body holds that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical abuse all occurring at once. And it's ritualized. This isn't like some random, oh, it's happening here or there. Like, no, it's so ritualized that as birth keepers, we can listen to someone's birth story and be like, they were lying there. This is what, this is what happened. They did this because of this. Like, you can name it like
because
a list.
It literally always happens pretty much the same fucking way. This is why there is even fucking doulas that work in the system. Because it always fucking happens the same way.
Like, I don't even want to get started on doulas in the system. Like, the fact, I just need to say this for everyone to hear. The fact that you have a position of someone like a doula who is there to advocate for you in your birth, in your medicalized hospital birth, should tell you that there is something wrong of why you should not be in there. If you need another person in there to make sure that you are respected, you probably shouldn't be there in the first place.
Literally. Literally, that should tell you all of the information you need to know about the medical system. All of it. And to bring it back to your experience even too, because I want to highlight the similarities between spiritually when someone is out of their body and being overtaken by something and what happens in the hospital. You even mentioned you were so drugged that your eyes were rolling back in your fucking head. You know what else happens when people's eyes fucking roll back in their head? Possession. That happens when people are fucking possessed. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and this is where, oh my God, no, it's not even, this is where, like, again, my upbringing and all of these things that I was brought up with, on one hand, I think that I was protected in so many ways, like, because I was able to, again, come out of that experience and still serve my child as the mother that I wanted to be in so many ways, which again is not usually the case when somebody goes through what I went through. But the visceral bodily reaction and how demonic it was, I knew in my body the whole time. And I didn't even piece that together again until years later, because I have always had, again, growing up in an occultish family, I know when there is energies that are present that shouldn't be there. I know the feeling in my body. Isn't it funny? As soon as I got into that hospital, that's the exact feeling that I had. I felt unsettled. I felt ungrounded. I felt vulnerable. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like I could let myself go. I didn't feel anything like that. And it only continued to amplify the deeper I got into the birth portal, which again was forced on me to begin with. So it's just so interesting that same feeling you get in the middle of the night when you wake up and you know something is there that shouldn't be there is the same feeling that I experienced, at least personally, being in the hospital in what should be a very sacred ceremony for myself, was like the complete opposite. And I honestly think I had such a visceral reaction to everything because I wouldn't submit to it in the same way. Like, did it highly damage me and like cause a lot of shit for me? Absolutely. But in a lot of ways, I feel like I wouldn't give myself over. And that's why, just like you said, like possession, like think of an exorcism, like that's literally what I looked like. So
Whoa.
it's just interesting.
Yep.
The duality of the situation, or rather not the duality, the similarities of what that looks like.
Yep. And if you don't have sort of that upbringing or even that wherewithal to recognize those similarities, like, yes, it also happens when people are highly drugged. So you'll just think it's like, oh yeah, this is highly drugged. But when you know the other layer of it, it's like a whole nother it's a whole nother true system that operates in your body and your mind, to where like you absolutely cannot, you can't. So yeah, thank you for sharing your story with that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that or not, but I kind of want to like transition this to the difference between you getting pregnant and moving within the system versus now outside of the system, in terms of like even your conception. Like, were there any synchronicities around that? Basically, tell me the whole story about your pregnancy.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, what's interesting is, like, if we want to go into a little bit, I guess I could start with the beginning, which is like a little bit of astrology in in the conception, the experience. So my Saturn is in Aquarius, like I said. So for anyone who is astrology savvy, obviously Saturn just moved out of Aquarius like yesterday or the day before. But anyways, I had my Saturn return last year. But what's interesting is I actually had my son during my last Saturn transit. So like you have a Saturn transit every 7-ish, 8-ish years, depending on where it sits in your chart. And I've actually mapped this back, like from the time I was 7 and like what was happening in my life then, and then what happened when I was 14, and then what happened when I was 21.
Wow.
So I had my son when I was 21. And then, of course, I enter into my Saturn return, and I end up, I believe that my completion of my Saturn return, or rather the karmic responsibility that you are to rise into through your Saturn return, was blessed with me conceiving this child. So, my Saturn also sits in my 4th house. So for anyone who doesn't know, that house is ruled by Cancer, which is the mother of the zodiac and the matriarch. So there's a lot of those themes that have run through my life, including me becoming a mother at 21. I lost my grandmother at 14, which my grandmother was a huge member of the Theosophical Society of Canada, and was a huge occultist and esoteric thinker herself, and kind of brought me up in that way of thinking. So that's kind of where that all intertwines as well. So I lost her when I was 14. Then I had my son. I became a mother at 21. And now I feel like I've gone through this rebirth, and I'm obviously having what I believe is a girl this pregnancy. So there's that aspect. There's obviously intertwined within that becoming a birth keeper during my Saturn return, also very 4th house, also very Aquarian, radicalized kind of way of my path there. And yeah, so like I started my year out like that. Just a lot of motherhood and matrilineal and ancestral themes that weaved through my life last year. And then, of course, like I said, I had spent the year really nourishing myself in my womb, and ended up, pregnant at the end of September on the fall equinox. So automatically knew that I was going to have a wild pregnancy. I'll say this, I actually knew when I joined RBK, I knew that part of my path in this work, in serving other women, that I was going to have another baby. Like I knew that. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I knew that I would have to experience the other side of birth. Like I obviously had this highly traumatic, demonic experience, and now like I'm going to experience the other side, or like the complete opposite end of the spectrum for that. And I believe that that's also integral to the work that I'm here to do with women. I believe that I will be able to hold both so potently after I give birth this summer. So that kind of was interesting too, that I had that knowing. And then it really happened. I can't say I wasn't consciously conceiving in the fact that I was like very much trying to conceive. We were open to conceiving. But what's interesting is we had a name years ago. We were like, oh, if we ever had a daughter, which I was not open to having children, by the way, for years after my son's birth, obviously. So yeah, we had like a name picked out where we were like, oh, if we ever had a daughter, we would have loved to name her this, right? So a couple weeks leading up to actually the whole month of September, that name kept coming up in like a multitude of ways. Hence why I also think I'm having a daughter. Like my son started at this new forest school, and the little girl that he befriended there like had that name. And then my friend sent me, you know, this photo of her son's class school list. And of course the name was on that list. And it's like, I'm not going to share it just because there's so many people energetically listening to this, but yeah,
it was understand.
Yeah, no, it was just, just very, and I was like, oh, like that's really interesting. And then I also I had been steaming regularly, like yoni steaming, again, just to re-nourish my body and like really connect with my womb and my body again. And I had this really insane bleed the cycle right before I got pregnant. That was like so abnormal. It almost kind of freaked me out. I was like, what is going on here? So that felt like a big release, like energetic release that I needed to have to make space in my womb, for this baby. Yeah. So again, I think just starting off with that is the different connection to my body. So I very much feel like I consciously, or rather we consciously conceived this baby just through the synchronicity and just the consciousness that I was bringing into my body and just where I was and how grounded I was. And at the same time, just the awareness, just the difference of body literacy that I hold now. And then obviously moving through this pregnancy, it does on a very simplistic level, like for anyone listening, it is so different to only answer to yourself. Like it is so liberating. It is so like freeing to not feel like going to all those appointments. Like I know some women, again, under the veil of like, this is so exciting. And like, I get my ultrasound picture and I, you know, oh, they're going to measure my belly and I get to hear the heartbeat like right away. And I get to do all these things. Honestly, that was miserable for me in that first pregnancy. I hated going to all those appointments. I feel like, you know, the cult initiation already starts then, as we know, and the ritualistic kind of dissociation that they bring you out of your body, because it's like you're now looking to them to tell them how you feel. Whereas this entire experience, I've really had to listen to my own body. And like, again, it's just such a practice. Like I was mentioning at the beginning of our call, you know, like this fear of preeclampsia. So like I've had some like carpal tunnel in my wrist, which is like from blood circulation, and my feet started getting a little bit swollen. And I was like, oh, fuck, like that's interesting. Like, I wonder why that's happening. And it's the curiosity of just really becoming aligned with your body in such a way of like, I trust my body to do what she needs to do in order for me to thrive and to take care of me. And then also on the flip side of that is like, I get to decide what I want to do with that. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, if I want to go check my blood pressure, I can absolutely go do that. And it doesn't have to mean anything. Like I I don't have to check my blood pressure. I can check in with the way I'm eating. I can check in with how much rest I'm getting. I can ask myself on an emotional and spiritual level, you know, is there something going on here that I'm not addressing? And I feel like it just deepens the entire experience in such a sacred way where I get to answer to myself, but I also get to take on this really sovereign way of being responsible to myself. So it's like there's no one else to blame either, which I think scares a lot of women away. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I just mean that in a very factual way of like, there's no one else to answer to, and there's also no one else to blame for anything. So it's like if I'm not feeling well, I can ask myself, like, what are you doing that is not making you feel like you're thriving right now? And then it is of my own responsibility to make those shifts if I feel called. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
So,
100%.
yeah.
And it's like that whole experience of 100% responsibility is truly facing your life. It's truly
Yeah.
interacting with life and your life as life is. You
Yeah.
know, because no matter how much you want to believe that, like, oh, there's now someone to blame, there's now someone to go to, whatever, there ultimately, when you strip it away to its core, that isn't true. Like,
Yeah.
it's always you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's always coming back to, like, what is happening in the situation? What did you choose for yourself? And maybe what you didn't choose for yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
No, 100 exactly. And again, with that, like, I love that you said it's like it's still you at the end of the day. So like even though you feel like there's somebody else you can blame, and there's a cost to that. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's the difference too, is like you can go have your doctor and your doctor can tell you and give you your, like, you know, clean bill of health, or they can pathologize you, or they can, you know, do whatever they're going to do. But there's a cost to that. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's where we get into like the risk versus safety. And I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I know my body well enough, and I also know it's interesting to observe your own mind, right? And like I only see this as another initiation, obviously a much more sacred and spiritual one, of I get to just deepen that knowing within myself. So like even when I said like my feet were starting to swell, and I was like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm going to notice it first, and I'm just going to sit with it and see where that leads. But then I also check in with myself. How is the rest of my body feeling? Am I feeling okay? Well, yeah, I feel like I'm thriving. Are you eating okay? Yeah, I'm nourishing my body really well. So it's like almost I feel in a way I'm undoing any other final unconscious layers that would ever make me question myself, which I think is part of the initiation in a wild pregnancy to bring you into a free birth, or to bring you into that complete sovereign birth experience that I'm looking to have, because I'm undoing any sort of doubt or questioning that I'm like experiencing it in any way. So I think that's really like an interesting aspect of it as well, is like if there is any doubt or there is any fear, it's giving you the opportunity to face it. Like you said, it's like facing life. It's like I have the opportunity to face any more unconscious maybe beliefs or layers that I wasn't aware were still there. Do you know what I'm saying? And they are for so many of us, because it doesn't matter how holistic or out of the matrix you live, we've still been conditioned for generations to believe otherwise. So it's like there's still these lingering, you know, thoughts or doubts. And yeah, like being in 100% responsibility is it's so liberating, and it's so freeing, and it's also so new in so many ways, for so many of us as well. So it's just really, it's beautiful. I'm enjoying it a lot. Like I feel so free in this pregnancy. It's like so sacred and so mundane at the same time. Like it's just like every day I'm pregnant, and that's just a part of my experience right now. And then obviously there's like this huge sacredness of the experience that I'm like really diving into. And like the further I get along in the pregnancy, the more I'm leaning into that and really being in that and just noticing all the things that that brings with it. But I also love that it's just like women have babies and women are pregnant and women give birth. And it's like, doesn't need to be this like, fuck, you got to go to the doctor every 4 weeks and you have to like do all of these things. It's like, I get to just live my life, like, because this is just a normal aspect of the human experience, like that I get to be pregnant and like, I just get to continue on living my life while it's happening. So yeah.
Love that. Love that so hard. And yeah, it frees you up to literally live your life, to literally live in life without unnecessary interactions with individuals that you don't fucking know and in all reality don't really know about you because they're not living in your body. And the majority of the testing that they do prenatally isn't even accurate testing. For example,
No, well, I mean,
ultrasounds. Like,
not scientifically like proven to do anything and also dangerous. So I mean,
we won't.
there's
Yeah,
just
there's
that
a lot to
aspect
go
of
there.
like
Yeah.
there's a lot happening over there. Like yeah, and the other part is that I've been like writing about this and like hoping to like release just, I don't know, some little article or blog post or Substack or whatever about it. But one thing that I've really noticed in this pregnancy, because I am like, there are days, you know, and especially like I'm going to be entering my third trimester soon. Like, yeah, there's days where I'm uncomfortable. Like I'm not sleeping well. I'm not having, you know, the greatest time the whole time here. But there's a humbling kind of energy that is starting to surround me and just a gratitude, because, and this is where, I mean, even in women, other women that I know that are like having wild pregnancies, and then other women that I know that are not having wild pregnancies, there is I don't even know the word to use. Gratitude, but there's like, I feel like this is probably going to rock some some heads here. I feel like women should be more humbled and more grateful, for the entire experience of pregnancy and birth because of the level of initiation and spiritual expansion that it allows for you, that only women have the ability to experience in like in our human form. And I've really just been like sitting with that of like, even in all the discomfort, and like I was just saying, I get to meet so many of my wounds, of my patterns, of my, you know, unconscious thinking, of all of these things that, you know, I get to meet them in such a real and raw way. And I get to move through them. I get to release them. I get to rework them or rewrite them or do whatever. And that's not even talking about the, you know, static experience, no matter how intense it may be or how, you know, pain free or whatever way that my birth is going to go. And that's the magic and mystery of it all, because I feel like so many women still want to escape the experience. And again, this is not coming from a judgment or a criticism. I think this also has to do with what we were saying with all of the MK Ultra and shit that has gone on for so long. So this is not a thing of like, you all should be more grateful.
Yeah.
This is not. I mean it in a deepening of like, I really think that it is such a honor to be able to have this experience, and like all of it, like all encompassing. So all of the discomfort, all of the, you know, whether it's physical or emotional sensations, and like heightening of experiences, and then of course the actual birth, whatever that looks like, and the medicine that it can provide for you and your soul, and where you're supposed to go and what you can access through that. You know, like people go off and smoke ayahuasca all the time, and it's like, this is like a million times that. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it's a whole other conversation. And I kind of had that conversation with another woman I had on the podcast in another episode about birth being the ultimate DMT trip. It's like, this is your your personally tailored ayahuasca trip that your body has perfectly curated to exactly what you need, because it's being made by your body for you to experience.
Yes, and it's like, if it's, do you know what I'm saying? And I know, I know in the birth community and birth world that you and I are a part of, like, we don't always like to use the word pain, like intensity and things like that, obviously. So we're rewriting the language that is used, but like, let's even use the word pain. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you are in an unfathomable amount of pain. Is like, what is there for you? Like, and what are you called? I just feel there's just so much avoidance,
Yep.
And avoidance without the wanting to deepen the experience. So it's like, I'm uncomfortable right now. What can I do with that? Do you know what I'm saying? Or like, what is that bringing up for me, and how can I move through that? And can I be grateful for this discomfort, because it's clearly bringing me something? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's just, just a completely different, I think, perspective shift that, like, again, I don't think many women have yet to experience. Because it's easier to escape, or it's easier to, like, just want to run away from, or want to escape, or want to kind of just avoid.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, I don't want to avoid any of it. I want all of it in its rawness and intensity, and whatever it's going to bring, because there's medicine there, and there's information there, and there's wisdom held there that I personally get to access. So there's a gratitude within that.
Yep. 100%. And it, for me, it's really presencing how it really boils down to, like, the same way you're approaching like pregnancy or even birth is highlighting the same way you approach your life and yourself. Are you constantly looking for an escape route? Are you constantly avoiding things? Are you constantly like shutting things down, or like, it's showing you where you're disconnected from life, literally, as you're bringing in life. Like, it's connecting you to life and simultaneously showing you how you're disconnecting yourself from life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's just like, I don't know, like, reverence. That's the word I'm looking for. Like, there should just be a deeper reverence for that you like, that I have access to all of this right now in such a potent way. Like, of course we all have access to that at any time if we want to show up and be present in it. But I just mean, like, in the energy that birth and pregnancy brings, it's like, I have so much access to all of that right now. And like, the reverence that I'm holding for that I get to move through it this way is just I don't know, just takes my breath away. It just makes me like, just so grateful. And such a difference, again, from the way that I experienced my first pregnancy, right? So
100%. I'm just like, as you're speaking, being reminded of this way of, having a wild pregnancy and a free birth, or like even just like wild birth, for lack of a better term, because from the beginning of time, like, all births are free births, so all of it's wild, all of it's like this innate ancestral experience. And I'm just being shown all these like visions of these women throughout like history, and being reminded that it's been that way longer than it has been the way that it is right now in mainstream, and I think that's like, it's not hilarious, but for lack of better terms, that's fucking hilarious.
yeah.
Like,
Well, no, that's the thing, right? Is like, and that's how well the MK Ultraing has worked, though, as well, is because it's like most women don't think of it that way, like, or don't know it to be that way, or they've poisoned us with the, well, mothers and babies died, and it's like,
well,
yeah, mothers and babies die in the hospital as well, and also, how did humanity get here if they were all obliterated in birth
literally.
prior to that?
Literally,
How could
how
you?
are we alive right now if everyone's babies perished? Like,
I can't. I know. Well, it's just, again, right? It's the whole initiation into the cult and into the, and I would say one of the sickest things about it is, which I mean, this is like the true MK Ultra, like, kind of goal or finale to the whole thing, is not only did all of like what we've talked about occur, but then you have women then go out and defend it, right? Like, it's like they vehemently defend the abuse, and like then try to scare other women into submitting to said abuse. And that's where, like, I mean, then we could get into the whole medical midwife conversation, which is like
a whole nother bag of fucking worms.
like wolf in sheep's clothing. Like, I mean, that honestly, you want to talk about like demonic and like really evil energetics at play, is like using women to essentially slip into women's homes to bring that abuse into a woman's like sanctuary, even though that woman thinks that she's choosing something different. I mean, that for me, when I put that together, that was like the ultimate, like, I was like, wow, okay.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
It's
so
freaking crazy. And I feel like if we start talking about it now, it'll be like a 3-hour podcast at this
I know. I know. Well, it just never ends. It just keeps going, and then you connect one part, and then you find, and then it just, and that's the thing, right? It's birth. Like, I think that at the end of the day is, it matters. It matters how babies are coming into this world. It matters how women are treated while that is happening. It matters about the work, emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental work that women are doing whilst pregnant, and what that birth initiation looks like. Like, these are all really important things. It's not just, for me, it's not just like, oh, I don't want to get abused, so I'm not going to birth in the hospital. It's like a lot bigger than that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just as we said, it's not just about the money in obstetrics. It's a lot bigger than that. And it's the same thing on the other side. So I think it's like an important conversation to keep having, because it affects everyone. Because we're literally dealing with new life coming into physical form. And that needs to be treated with the utmost, like, again, reverence and sacredness and just respect overall. And that includes women respecting themselves as well. So
100%. Yep. Wow. Yeah, this whole conversation has been freaking epic and amazing, and I love everything that was said on both ends. I feel like we kept talking about wild birth, and wild pregnancy too, and we didn't even fully even describe what it is. Like, say what it is definition wise. So if you haven't already figured it out for yourself by now, when we talk about wild pregnancy, we mean a pregnancy that is completely 100% your responsibility and is outside of medical management or medical hands in any way. A complete ancestral and integrity filled experience from your higher self or whatever into your body is my description of it. What's your description of it?
I was honestly going to say very much the same thing. Just, yeah, like a 100% responsible or like responsibility, self-responsibility, ancestral, traditional, pregnancy and experience outside of the medical matrix, out of medical hands. I loved how you said medical management, because I mean, that's a lot of what pregnancy in the system is. And yeah, I would say like a sovereign and radically responsible experience of intuition and what is the other word that I'm looking for? Intuition and instinctual
Yes.
experience as well. Because I feel like those go hand in hand, but I also feel like they're slightly different as well. So I always like to refer to both. But yeah, an instinctual and intuitive experience, an initiation into motherhood. There's my definition.
100p. And as you're even describing your definition, it was like really in my brain, it's where instinct and intuition meet, literally.
Precisely. Perfect. Yeah. Boom.
Which isn't that like, I won't say the meaning of life, but isn't that like the freaking cheat code to being a human? To like coincide your intuition and your instincts, your animal and your, spiritual. Like,
I mean, we also grew up being
taught that. So
it's only been driven into us how many times. So maybe that's why we're like, yeah, that's the whole point of this whole fucking journey. Like,
duh. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what a wild pregnancy is, and will continue through to the birth. So yeah, rebirth. I know. It's all interesting.
Yeah, it's all interesting, and there's so many different levels and layers that we could definitely dive into. I'm feeling really good and complete with leaving it here. Do you feel complete? Do you have anything?
I feel
good.
No, I think I feel complete. I feel really good. I feel like we covered everything that we wanted to, or that we set out to cover, and yeah, it just feels really good.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Thank you again for agreeing to be on the podcast and for just being your awesome freaking self. And
thank you for having me and inviting me here to chat with you.
Oh, my absolute pleasure.
If you loved what you heard today, please let me know by giving the podcast some love in the reviews, liking, commenting, and sharing with someone you love as well. As always, too, you can connect with me on Instagram at qioflifebirthkeeper, and with any of my guests with their information and details located in the description. Until next time, Ashe.